Well, thank you. This really, truly is an honor. When I was watching the video, I was thinking about you all really are a pathway. And you're a pathway, and you help with the willpower on giving children the ability to have a more hopeful future. And I love the story earlier about the family and the wonderful mother here that had really put a stake in the ground and said, my family isn't going to fall victim to this generational cycle anymore. So that's a very hard thing to do. And we know through what you talked about earlier, but also we know that generationally addiction affects us, and it goes back generation after generation. And that's something I dealt with as a child. It was a stigma back then, but also it was generational. My mother's father was a terrible alcoholic, and my mother had lived a very terrible childhood of abuse, and her natural coping mechanism was alcohol and drugs. And she actually met my father after she had OD'd on heroin and was in she was in a psych ward. And the first time he met her was going and picking her up and taking her out of there. And really my mom's story really encapsulated our whole childhood, because there was a time period where I think my mom gained a little bit of freedom, a little bit of peace in her life, but it wasn't sustainable because she didn't have the help. There wasn't, the stigma really blocked our family from resources and help back then. My parents actually met at a drug rehab, and I spent my whole life living there. But my mother, her suffering was so deep and so great, she really forbid us from talking about it. And at a young age, I didn't really understand what that meant. I didn't understand that other families didn't live like this. I just remember that there wasn't a time period with my mother that I remember that we weren't really babysitting her and protecting her from her own self. And so I look back and I think my dad was doing everything he could to cope and give us the safest environment he could, but he so desperately wanted my mother to be alive that the way that we did that was, it was our family goal every day. We woke up every day, we looked for hidden pills, we looked for alcohol, all of those things. She wasn't allowed to be by herself. And that's a heavy lift for children. And I was the oldest, and so I bore a lot of that burden. But I think back now that I have my own children, I think about my 6-year-old little brother that was tasked with following my mom around at the grocery store so she wouldn't steal over-the-counter medication. And hide it and take bottles at a time. And I think about that is the generational cycle that you all are trying to break. Because I love my mother, and I loved my mother, and we loved our mother, but we didn't know how to articulate that story. And the reason that this really, I think, is such an honor to me, more than I can really put into words, is because an organization like you that give a voice to a story and create a pathway for a family to break that generational cycle is powerful. And so I just feel so honored to receive this. And like so many others, where in Oklahoma, unfortunately, I have found as I began to share my story more often, my story is more common than it isn't. Because we know, if you've been in Oklahoma for very long, we have been plagued with these generational statistics of poverty, addiction, incarceration, mental health, lack of resources, those types of things. And the more I share my story, or shared my story, the more I realized that every single community that I was in talking about it was affected. And the more we talk about stories like this, and we bring the conversation out of the dark and from behind locked doors, we give children the power back in their life to reclaim a hopeful future. And as a child, I didn't really have the language for what I was experiencing, which is fascinating. I loved your examples earlier, because I wouldn't have been able to articulate had someone been able to tune into me and ask. I wouldn't have known how to talk about that. I knew I loved my parents, and I felt with such a deep passion that I wanted my mom to be okay, but I didn't know how to tell that story, even if someone would have given me the opportunity. I knew something was wrong, but I really felt powerless. And I learned so early that we couldn't talk about it, and it was more than an unspoken thing, it was something that went back generationally. that I think my mother was told. And so it just passed down, and it created this deep, dark chasm in our family that my siblings and I really struggled to combat and get out of. And that silence really shaped a lot of who I became and then who I strive to become every day. And that's why Peaceful Families mission resonates so very deeply with me. You are actually giving kids the voice that I didn't have. You're giving them the truth, the tools to cope, and the chance to start healing earlier. You're showing them that they matter, even when the grown-ups around them are struggling. And that kind of support doesn't just change lives, it actually breaks generational cycles and builds hope and well-being in the families in Oklahoma. So as I receive this honor with just unbelievable gratitude for what you're doing in our state, and I really want to receive this honor in honor of all the kids in Oklahoma that are walking this out, that sit in their bed alone at night and they think, how do I talk to my teacher about this? How do I talk to a family member or neighbor? How do I get the help that I know I need? I just don't know how to articulate it. And I just want to empower everyone in this room. So many of you may have stories in your family that are similar, may have been held captive or caught in that generational cycle of addiction here in Oklahoma. A story matters. And the more you share your story and we share these common languages, and we as community members can step next to children and families and link arms with them, the more we will see an impact in our state for the positive. And the more we're going to see children taking back the power in their own lives, breaking out of those generational cycles, and putting their own stake in the ground, saying, I deserve to have a healthy and hopeful future here. And what I love about that is it's all the power of a story, and it's all the power of words, and each one of us can do that in our own little sphere of influence, in our grocery stores, in our neighborhoods, wherever we are. We can use the power of words and the science of hope to break those generational cycles and help the children of Oklahoma move forward in a hopeful future. So let's keep working together to bring hope, healing, and honesty in the lives of kids and families that matter the most in our state. Thank you so much. Such an incredible honor. I appreciate your time today.